So yeah, so after a 2-week break, they were ready to go again.
Yeah, that's in the Tamjaka to Tobjalana Machiva Sanjay Kumar China Tobacha. And the Shadow and Chanju Sema Love and the future the Lawale, Shingle, Shivala, Tuala, Tradition Manoa to go to. And the Kazuba, the Kasura. And Kasura, Gaja, Juju Chibu, and Geshe to use Navy something what in the Kumacha.
And so we set our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the purest state of enlightenment. Knowing that in order to attain such a state, I need to perfect all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. To perfect those trainings in turn, I need to have a thorough understanding of them. And I can only gain this by listening to an unmistaken source, an unmistaken text. And so it is with this in mind that I am here today to listen to an explanation of some of the verses of the great text called the Bodhisattva's Way of Life.
Hola, and I'm doing a kitchen. I'm ranking Nakala, Tabjala, Twitch, the Mangoran, Lama, number Tabjala, Twitch, Thomas Shadow Toba, and Shaji Chani, Utudo, the Tamba, Kula Chugu, Megados, Dodger Soa. And yes, and young jacket to say number. What did the most of the
And so, as we normally do, also, we set up our visualization in the space in front. In actuality, our own root guru, in aspect, the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, who has seated in the Vajra posture, is in the saffron robes of a monk, has one face, two hands, the right hand in the earth-touching mudra, the left hand holding an alms bowl filled with nectar. He is fully compassionate and greatly skillful in means.
And the Ranga Tagotua, and that you said the Ranga Pamane, Nani Dune, Jebe, and the Taiba, Majasin, Tamja, Masawa, never you, something what in the chat.
And all around us, we visualize from our parents on outwards to friends and so on, and relatives, to include all sentient beings without exception.
What in the chat? What the chat? And that doing that said that way, and because doing that said that way, and don't buy Shaja to me, the Joe or Jamba, Tuga Hole, we said to me, Singlam Jan never, Yeshiva. Only the Java Janta, Yeshiva, and don't buy Shaja to me, number Janta, Tim, only Ongo, Chula, which is never, and me, you will get it. What is the commercial?
And then, we turning our attention back to the figure that we are visualizing of Shakyamuni Buddha. We see that he is marked in the three places with the letters Hung. And from the Hung at the heart, light rays emanate and they go out into the pure realms, inviting all of the wisdom beings and the empowering deities. These come, the wisdom beings dissolve into the central figure. The empowering deities bestow the nectar of empowerment through the crown, filling the figure, then overflowing, and from that overflowing nectar appears the figure of Akshobhya on the crown of Shakyamuni Buddha.
Go to the question. 오래다 란다 란게 타고도 막게 심지어 탐제자 리두스스 동안 넣으시면 이거 넘버 나눠서 민의 시제 남주 요게 아니 가서도 이제 가서도 남주 요게 아니 가서도 코알이 녀바죠 년중게 데 다들게 아니 데레 쪽인데 원하는 거 봐도 또 마셔자 또 이제 된대게 아니 이시게 때 왔다 했다 뭐 어디가 때 요티겠지 어디서 고마셔
And that we can see that all the sentient beings of all the six realms all around us, and though they are the residents of the six realms, they have the capacity to perceive with the human intelligence, and that they are then aware that in psychic existence, at least in the nature of suffering and developing the quality of renunciation on the back of that, and able to regard the figure in the front in the visualization with the triple kind of faith of conviction, faith, pure faith, and the manifest faith.
어떻게 아니 자 안에 심절미 닝제 안 대다게 안에 동에 나올 미스베 닝제 동에 제도게 잡아 안에 델레 쪽에 뉴다 랑게 다 동에 탐자 대화 딱이 지금 지가 주도 제마도 봐 세보 인사 델레 제도에 뉴바도 수라 요스나 안에 균나 세트에 심제도도 투제 람라라 뭐바도 사지 오다 라마 샤자스니 콜도 다 공유 고마지 마도는 타면도 대토바 지기 삼사이 what 고바시죠.
And from our own point of view, then we are looking at all of these sentient beings with that mind of compassion, so aware of their suffering and finding it unbearable, in fact, and wanting to relieve them of that suffering and the causes of that suffering. And likewise, looking on them fondly with the mind of affectionate love, hoping that they will have happiness, wishing that they will have happiness and the causes of happiness, and going beyond that to really take personal responsibility for both the relieving of suffering and the bestowing of happiness. And we take that on and say we will have that special intention to enter into that process ourselves. But we realize our own shortcomings in this regard, and look to the only plausible example of a state of mind that can do that, and that is the state of enlightenment itself. And the Buddha, who for the very purpose of doing this, has generated the mind of enlightenment, trained on the path, and finally attained a fully complete enlightenment. And so therefore I see clearly that I have no option but to attain the state of enlightenment myself, if I am to follow through on this special intention of relieving all sentient beings of their suffering and providing them with every happiness.
what does combat what does 간제 지금 닝제 나라도 잠바다 닝제스네 간게 가고 지에지 아니 로 아주 출루 간가라 아니 지금 아주 고샵도 지고 지에데 출루 간게 닝고도 잠바다 닝제를 샤선 이 아주 그거도 지고 지고 열봐 지고 열봐 어디 닝고데 에센데 잠바다 닝제 속도 어디다 자치 머리 샤서 다 인데 다 잠바다 닝제 쓰게데 책잠을 샤나 편도가 랑이 귤을 깨봐줘 다 귤을 깨게 아니 동해게 나서 라 미세베 딜라테네 인지 용이요데 대화다 된도그 잠바 대화다 된도그 로디게 때네 잠바 용이요 봐 아니 디니가 딱까지 랑게 초아유가 터나 아니 지금 딱까지 노게 투아체 딱게 좀 버와 게좀 버려 어디래
These qualities of compassion and love, we can see, are so fundamental, so central, not just to this tradition, but to all religions. In fact, we could say that they are the essence of all religious traditions, and it goes a long way towards having the say that respect and appreciation of religions, because they hold these qualities of love and compassion so highly, and that it's so important that we not just leave this as sweet words, as that we all like to discuss and so on, but rather we need to put those words into action. That means generating them in our own mind stream, and so that they are the minds that kind of like our first recourse to seek to, on the one hand, relieve all beings of suffering, and on the other to bestow them with happiness, place them in happiness. And so the more we can do this, the more we can really develop our own mind states. That it's so important that then we kind of move from just words, leaving it paying lip service to loving kindness and compassion, and to making them part of our own daily experience.
다 되는 다 잡아든 인제들에 아니 저 림바 먹고 쉬우 좀 것도 왔다. 지금 잡아든 인제서 강아 집어로 레모도 림바 먹고 용한테 갈르는 림바 먹고 위달 갈르 때려서 아니 죽비달로 때려 용것도 와. 동네게 남자 같이 먹었으니 뭐저 다데 저 가서래 미 동에서 많이 받잖아다. 도와리 주고 승제 참 저거 동네 이 동네 유이 싸워 가인 받을 심했더니 이 나주 통화더니 아니 미세봐 요나 아니 그 인제 현대 미디어 주고 와. 잠발래야 아니 저 내가 그 디기 싸움 된도 그 잠바 많이 받잖아. 때도 디기 그 잠바 아니 타바다 탐제 그 사이 연대도 두두 요바 심해 더네 아니 된데 그 톰도게 로직 경어도 사메 그 대화라 소마게 된데 그 로직 경어도 잠바티야 아니 셀이 개베 잡아 쳐들어 봐. 그 잡아야 좀 바꾸고 좀 것도 와. 아니 들라 때는 딱 띵sab려도 되네 하고 그러 봐. 제가 다 랑줄에 띵sab어 요래 나바서 된 거다. 띵sab어도 랑줄에 깨도 봐서야 되다. 이거는 랭게를 와.
And so, of course, it is important to point out that there are extremely there are so many different levels of love and compassion here that and it stands to reason that there are many different causes that bring about the love and compassion that we are referring to here. That we can see that when we talk about suffering as the object of compassion, and that there are many different levels of suffering, not just the human suffering that we are aware of, but indeed the suffering of the animal realms, and all the 6 realms of existence are included within the suffering that we are discussing, and therefore the compassion that we are able to, or should be able to develop on the basis of that. And likewise happiness, being able to provide all kinds of happiness, all levels of happiness, to that permanent state of happiness, that true happiness, that they again looking into the variety of causes that must be generated to develop this kind of happiness. And so there's a tremendous different levels which bring about a very sort of profound and deep appreciation of what's involved in developing compassion, in developing love. And we should seek to generate those kind of most profound and deep levels of compassion and love in our own mind stream.
동네에 미세베 인제 저래 동네 뭐저도 뒤 동네 뭐저 왔장 그보다 동네 그 싸와 가리샤 뭐저도 다 동네 싸와디 아니 뭐저도 뭐저발라 아니 다도 짐베게 지나 다도 짐발라 때는 용다도 뭐저고 너무 두서 뭐저고 이 싸와 단지 머리가 뭐저고 아니 다 대다 탄저도 이 델레 단지 머리 버들 거 추바 이마 뭐시네 이 녀버 담에 또 배셔라 뭐신 것도 다 계속 그 띵사고 같이 침베 저게 아니 잡아도 인제데 이따가다 땜바다 자체와다 띵사고 용두고도 와
And so, of course, in the examination or analysis of compassion, we need to understand suffering. And so here, it's important to recognize again the various levels of suffering, the varieties of suffering, that to get into the root of suffering itself. And as it's explained, it's this process of grasping at a self-entity. And that it's important to recognize this at the outset, that we need to to really uproot this ignorance of self-grasping. And we need to therefore generate the antidote. Direct antidote to that is the wisdom of selflessness. And so it's kind of like looking at now straight away, you see this much more profound approach to suffering itself, and seeing how you need to get to the very heart of it, the very root of it, in order to be able to completely develop a compassion that is stable, that is profound, that is broad and all-encompassing. And that so it's important to understand that the kind of compassion that we're talking about, it needs to be underpinned by this kind of meditation, these kind of causes that give rise to it.
근데 좋아해나? 아니 그 딱그 동해디 samai ba 동해 주디라 나와를 미스바 고고도. 동해가 주 나와를 미스바 요한도 아니 라라 내가 개근 제바이나 딜라야 이제 아니 개투에지. 이제 개투에지. 요도다. 다가잖아. 거기 동해가 주게 나왔더라. 나왔더라 미스바 개지. 다시 우리 개지 못 다. 딜라 때 아니
when the young fellow Phil was whippersnipping.
그래.
When the young fellow
get to say it.
after kanal chilap. 다가자 동해기 주디 뭐처네 아니 디 동해 주의 상황도 주디 상황도 좋아 임바인자 아니 미스바지 좋아 임바이나 아니 닌제데 시다게 다 지금 사바데 자체와 용도도 다 자체와 다 네가 또 뭐처베 토네 다다다 슝디 가고 때다 새 토슈게 잡아데 닌제 깨다치 된 것도 와 슝디 가고 때새 토슈게 잡아데 닌제 깨다치 다 디코나 메긴치
So when we look at suffering in this way, we're not just then looking at the manifest experience of suffering, but we're looking into the causes of that suffering as well. This is most important, that when we call on our compassion, it encompasses not just the suffering that we can perceive, but also what's behind that, the causes that give rise to that suffering. This is most important for being able to extend our compassion to, for example, people who even harm us, that we wouldn't have any thought of revenge or returning that harm, but rather understand that they are operating in the sense of under the power of their negative causes, and that this is giving rise to their harm. Therefore, they are an object of compassion for us. They have to be an object of compassion, and we should seek to benefit them. And this is very, very important, and that to understand also that when we talk about compassion and love in this way, that this is the level, the highest level of compassion and love, that is the subject matter of this very text. Somba capsule drawn.
올라서 다단다도 모두 어디가 좀 전에 신배토네 신배토네 당고도 세체 아니 둘라 아니 가서 좀 샤저도 발라 미베 아니 지금 가서 대봐 안 다음에도 이제 뭐도 대봐 아니 심지어 미베 닝제 호다들 잡아도 닝제 호다들 검시방 안에 다 딜 편바 두배 채도 다 된대지 다 가져도 좀 샤저도 미베 고마도 맞던 톱에 채도 아니 당고도 수들아 조상 지구를 가지고 어떤데 제가 심배토는 어디 세체 다 수바 教授多年是他教授多年早晚了장조님고 체제바 산제 남다 Sanja Namla Japsuche, Churda Chandu, Semba, Tolan Deshin Japsuche.
And so just to remind ourselves then that to maintain that sense of presence with regard to the object that we are visualizing in the space in front, the Shakyamuni Buddha, and that sense of a really profound triple aspected faith of pure faith, the manifest faith, the faith of conviction. And also that we are also keeping in mind that we are surrounded by all kinds of other sentient beings who are suffering and developing that sense of maintaining that sense of compassion, and that understanding that our implicit motivation in our study here is to develop that sense of compassion that encompasses all sentient beings, to benefit all of those sentient beings, as well as, of course, the knowledge to emulate the state of the Buddha that we have faith in order to be in the best position to benefit those sentient beings. So all of this we try to keep in mind and be aware of as we're going through the text. And we continue on from where we left off several weeks ago to a third subheading, which was going for refuge. And this is looked at in verse number 26, where it says, I seek refuge in all Buddhas until I possess the essence of awakening. Likewise, I seek refuge in Dharma and in the assembly of Bodhisattvas.
Jamdu chill yore. That in the Yinza, and Sanje de, and Rotangara the Tuja, Lalocomba over Sanje, what the Namunga Lam Tengetela, and the Japjomba Pocha. And the wood at Gasre, church, church. That church is the one to Beja that you go, you get the Chokundo to Cheshire with the Chogunet, that got the Kodan and Lamden. Chogunet, Watakaja, Rota. Tony wasn't to be shut up. Tony wasn't to be shut up. Dibala was Dimir was a new chicken. Tikesona, and it no one came out to watch it. No more sour for was for a tad of a chicken device. The chocolate, and till go that, till I'm there, go there, sing it, and he tip up on the pumba. What is that? Go there. That Kindu Kunjo Singate, and then Tony was on top of Sheriff Ragula Timber Casa. Casa Tadi, Reda Sanjete, Amjita Pucha, Chete, Manche. Kindu de, and the Cato Taka, New York, two sorts. Was an abuse, Amjita near the Meg to Hachavina, and around it, and it's a Casota. Round Coading, Yasu Tungele, and Cover Yasu Tungele. And it not to America, and it not to ship a tonya. And it did sort of Nasa sort of check, and it did a tire meant it, only to be shut up check. Meant, and it did temper body, Yamu the temper body, and it Casoda to my shaja to my check, to my check, to be over check, Sanja check, Sanja Kunjo check. And they told a Casoda and Judge, New York today. Kamiyata da mikwe tasade ani kindu kunjoti kaso pabe takajaja tekula tebe kansa pabe kansa what is all that da mi tesum da kaso da kaso japsu jogen da na basigi yorba na basigi yori what is it
And so the yes, this verse deals with, of course, going for refuge, and this is rather central to all different strands of Buddhism, and that whether one is counted as a Buddhist or not is demarcated by whether one goes for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, as outlined in this verse, and that here the Buddha is the one seen to show us the path, and so is seen as the one who is the demonstrator of the path of refuge. And then the Dharma is seen as the actual refuge. And this refers specifically to the true cessations and true paths in the 4 Arya truths. And that's true cessations, of course, specifically refer to the direct realization of selflessness and that wisdom that's then on the mind stream, and the true path, of course, the path that leads to that particular cessation. Then the Sangha is referred to as these Arya Sangha beings. That they are persons who have those particular realizations of true cessation and true paths on their own mind stream. And so they are the kind of classical definitions of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in the context of refuge. And then in looking at it in terms of an example, we can see the Buddha as like the doctor, the one who is prescribing the medicine, and then the Dharma as the actual medicine itself, that which we must take in order to recover, and that the Sangha are like the nursing staff who take care of us, who also are like this example to us of how to lead a good, healthy life. And so we are the patient. We are the patient who is suffering from the sickness of cyclic existence, and sufferings of the lower realms, etc. And that we need to get freedom from that, to be cured, to gain release from that sickness. And so we need to really take the medicine of the Dharma and develop the antidote, the cure of the wisdom realizing selflessness.
다들에 해서 안 점도 주들라 아니 점도 피다고 제발라 아니 주피다고 참고라 주피다고 주들라 아니 로다 코아당이야 송게 동네네 집에 집과제 될라께베 누바데 아니 점려 군조술로 유베 이치베 이치 되니까 제 수체중고 온게 점도데 피다로 이켜봐 요거요 다다다디 투모 어도체 다 투모 마이베 어도 다 제바체베 어도잖아 코아당이야 송 잠마 코아당다 녀소 자마서 시달라야 라니 집어 시다 되니 들라야 징네 다가자 디탈로네 마티바치 전에 아니 가서다 와다 시시디게 집벌래 집바디 네 아니 집바 징네 아니 될레케베 누바디 아니 가서다 잠내 군조sol로 유베 이치 와다 다가자 대바 쳔로 온드잖아 와들자.
And so also, of course, like everything else, that to really be able to generate refuge correctly and completely, we need to actually have established the causes that bring about such a refuge. And they are normally outlined as two. One is that we have a healthy fear of the suffering of cyclic existence and the lower realms, and two is that when we look to the triple gem of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we have a certain faith and trust that they will be able to provide the path that protects us from that fear. And so these are the main two common causes of generating a refuge. The uncommon causes include those two, plus the Mahayana as perspective, and that this is when we recognize that to simply go for refuge, to aim for my own freedom from fear and so on of these cyclic existence and the lower realms is really not enough, not good enough, especially when I understand that all mother sentient beings are in the same boat. And so it's this kind of going for refuge with this kind of expanded and not just fear for my own state, but for all sentient beings, and that wanting to relieve them of that fear, that we also go for refuge.
시다 다 소소 시외 탈라 라니 찍고 시대 되니 그 로케네 다까지 타바 짬토베 딜라야 징네 다 딜라야 징네 딜레 타드 시시 니가를 단두지고 와 단두 어떤 델리교베 누바데다 산제 최kin도 이체 어떤 주고 거 어떤 그래서
So it's not just this fear of attaining freedom from the cyclic existence and the lower realm, but also a fear related to just saying being satisfied with simple nirvana or liberation from cyclic existence, that there's more to do than that.
What did it? What did it? What that didn't that do didn't soon there's a GC Janju Nimbol, that do didn't Tanda soon there's that kind of cost of Tanda soon there, do didn't soon there, and GC Janju Nimbol Chijabato, Takaja, Janju Nimbo Chijaparsi, the GC Janju Nimbola Chijo, Sanje Kuma Matok Batos, Sanje Kuma Matok Bato, that Bato, or Takaja, Sanja Japsicho, that Sanje, and the Castle Sanje again, that consider that you're the ship on it, and just to bubble. You the ship on it, just drawing. That Tarani Shingi, and taking a Chokundo, taking as a taking because a Chokunjota, Jaju sent by years or so. For that, taking a Chokujota, then they get taken Lamshu Kansa, take a public to get that 20 water to be set up. Right, set up the Chokujocha, right? And 20 water to be set up the Jibala was Nibuchene, and it Nambu Lam Tobatil, and Gotentel, Goten. What you get Chokujota. Then they get regular the Chanjo and the talk, Chansa Papa Namaya, they should be kept to water. Sanjala job to draw the physical job to dredge what the chick job to bubble. Chick job to be that what to be tona, but the job to do.
And so from this day onwards, until I am capable of taking the essence of enlightenment, as it says here, which really means until I attain the state of enlightenment, I will go for refuge to the Buddha as the one who's demonstrating the path. And then the Dharma jewel, the Mahayana Dharma jewel, as the actual refuge, as we refer to, the true paths and the true cessations, being that realization of the selflessness, the wisdom realizing selflessness, and that generating that on our mind stream, and the full recognition of the true path as that which leads to that true cessation, both on the mind stream as the demonstration of the true Dharma jewel. And then the assembly of bodhisattvas, the Arya bodhisattvas, who actually have those particular realizations on their mind stream as the Sangha jewel. Likewise, I go for refuge to those also.
What the Sanjas was the Lugu on the Cheva, historical on the Jeva, Sanga Jumde, the death of the Pojuma, the Choju, and the Sanja Tamja, Sanja Nams, the Mansera, Choju, Sanja Tamja, and the Caso the Tabaja, Dr. Jones, what that you that do some Sanja Charajuga, Deva Sanja, no, Tata Sanja, Mahoma San Gavar, Sanja, what the job to choose, what in the chat, and the Taganisha taking a Chokujo, that was to rather Choju, use of it, then Chokujo. And it can do good job delay, public can do that, because you do some public can do good job. And it's up to you. Candida, take what you will trade the number Lemana, because of the table love chimbo, the Shibu on the Sambata, Nipata, Mongoch and Yorwa. Some of the Jachi don't want to do what did the article what did it that the can do the Injimiji Tawata Aniketa Mara. That was the Kameva can do the water. Kameva can do because of full ordination Serata, Galon in a Galoma in the Tat and they and it's because of the Toma Chatan where you get what and they get the Galoshita Chila and Galong the Tankas can do to Shisha Yorma. In a Tamuna. When I can do again, Injimiji Rabdu to my inco. Chimbale, Tony was to be shared. You think Kasa Yimaina? Chimaina, they can do good at Quite rabdu chung mo kecha mare ina tango to tamya wa to chaba ina ani gelon because full ordination ta shiya chaba ta because sanga group sire what the chila ta ka je de kunjo ju shi shagu yorba what the
So also here to understand that it's not simply the historical Buddha Shakyamuni that is the subject of going for refuge here. When it says here, I go for refuge, it means you'll go for refuge to all Buddhas that have ever been, that have ever demonstrated the Dharma of the past, the present, and those into the future. And so one is taking that on board. And that's two that yes, and that we go for refuge to the Dharma jewel. This is true cessations and true paths in our generating those in our mind stream as the actual Dharma jewel. And to understand also, in terms of the Mahayana outlook here, it is vast in terms of its motivation, vast in terms of its objectives, and that so in terms of like here, we're looking to gain the benefits and the blessing of all the Buddhas and so on. And when it comes to the Sangha jewel, that it doesn't necessarily have to mean those monks and nuns as Sangha, but Sangha means those who in this context have those particular realizations of true cessation and true paths on their mind stream. And they can be the Sangha jewel, or they're the actual Sangha jewel, in fact. And so they may be ordained or may not be ordained. In the common kind of way of things, we look to those who have fully ordained monks and nuns as a kind of the example of the Sangha jewel, and that's fine. But in actuality, it's those beings, whether they are ordained or not, who have these particular realizations on their mind stream. So I was pointing out that a lay person who may not have a great kind of knowledge of the Dharma, but yet has this realization of emptiness on their mind stream, a direct realization of emptiness on their mind stream, who, in spite of not having great learning, has certainly taken the essence of the meaning.
No, full order the shemana or sanga mari samsa lo la chior ba what that me karsana masana so tony goson to besha yonda yonde chimbur ba yonde chimbur eta yonde chimbur ta de tony goson to besha gyula mi sanga mari lava ina so the dong sanga cha de ba sanga cha de ra ko ta de cha nangi yonde ga cha ne anda ruata udire
So sorry, Gina mentioned that he was actually just saying that whether one is counted as the Sangha jewel in this context is not dependent on whether they wear robes. So it's all about a lay person who may have this kind of realization on their own mind stream. It is definitely counted as the Sangha jewel because it is that which is referring to inner qualities as well.
That's what the Shiva Diba Shabala she that Diba Shabala she is Nava Sunjiva top, thank you top, Nyamboku de Juveto, Nyabala Lato top, what the chap.
And so the next subject that will be discussed is the confession of negativity. And this has 4 main outlines, which correspond to the 4 powers of purification. And this is 1, the power of totally rejecting, which corresponds with the generation of regret. Secondly, the power of the basis. Thirdly, the application or the power of applying all the antidotes. And fourthly, the power of turning away from repeating these faults.
가서 거두이네 너무 랑 생비 상황도 셈 너무 도송의 상황도 주네 거두이네 다 디버사 요르다 또 매번 단다 사심바리 사되게 요르 왔다 간제 직전에 다 간제 사되게 요도 다 디버데 다다 맞아 탐매버 다 디버 다야라 안다지 탐 먹으시다 요르다 이네 디나네 다 초도 줘봐지 다 가서 너무 또 없이 창외 거라 또 없이 가서 비다가 요에 저게 아니 디버데 다 숙제와 topshi pe pita ko pe longa jiwa imanan diba tsawan dan jebu nyomo wa chaya da ga je topshi de ane pita lu onge ya ga je nyoa ina ya shu juru bu sha ma nyoa juru bu nyoa de tu de to ya yana je pe nya song de dong shu chen bo de nyoa la ya de nya song de nyomo de ce de la ane je ne na ta la so ba de de ko ne ti ta de ya to de ane pe de ne pita lu ge ane je go na wa sam ge 근데 해택 잡아서 근데 그 디버 톱청부터 다 줘요. 어디가 저 나서 봐야 가지고 두면 싸워니는 요 먹어 왔잖아. 다 줘야 다. 나 좋아져. 다디 요에지 출로네 아는 산제기 진압축 체주고 말이 랑기 산제기 진압축 지자래 건가라. 다 니는 요 말이 얘네 랑기 뭐네 다그 짬도 부탁을 다가네 생게 샘게 부탁을 다가네 냐부 톱시 창외게 아니 냠네 부탁을 토네 아니 디과데 다치 좀 되게 도 다치 좀 되게 도딱 녀바도 냐부 톱시 창고요다.
And so we can need to purify negativities. This is a kind of a no-brainer because we can see the way that our mind works, that we are so much and so easily under the power of negative motivations, of affliction. And so we are accumulating negativities, not to mention all those that have are already on our mind stream. And so here we need to purify. That is clear. And so that the best way of doing this is to be able to apply this particular strategy of the 4 opponent powers, and that here it said that to the extent to which we can be very efficient and effective at purification, we'll determine what kind of result we may have to experience because of our negativities. And so if we have perfectly applied the 4 opponent powers and keep our minds pure in that process, then we may not have to experience any negative result of the negativities we have purified. This then continues to, if we are less skillful, we may have to experience negative results, but they will be much less severe and will not last very long. And then thirdly, we may have negativities on our mind stream which might otherwise have led to a rebirth in the lower realms for us, but for now will be experienced. The results will be experienced as something like a headache or a flu or something in this life. So it's a much more agreeable sort of result to experience. And so it's important to understand that the efficacy of our purification is not reliant on the blessing of the Buddha, but rather on the skill with which we generate refuge, generate the mind of enlightenment, and actually apply these 4 opponent powers.
수강 요마 타메와 임바이나 다 레녀바 마사가 수강 요마 다 요마 다 레녀바 사 사도네 아니 뭐도 제부 데이터 가져 저 남인데 제부 아니 냐솔라소바 게트웨 아니 노아 주드 샤바 주드 단데라소바 다 샤바 남이 제부 냐솔라 케바 임바이나 동네 다지 냐솔라 케바 다 동네 녀바 임바이나 이네 되네지 타줘봐 이네 다 제가 주도는 영화 주도니까 모두는 동네 영화지 야 거잡교체를 더 되게 좋아 다 되네 또 이단체에 소쇼로 다 되게 뭐 약고자 삼로 땅이나 삼로 땅이나 다즉 삼로 땅이나 즉 사사바데 다 샤톰 전에 다다지 맞아 탑매 되겠지 탑매 되겠지 다 샤네 샤톰 전에 마다바 이나다 뭐 샤톰 제마도는 하바 이나다 동네 이제 다 쳐서다 남지만도 뒤쪽 근데 용어에 내주 로가리만도 다 사진 그래도 다 사진 뒤 아니 단다 가서데 다 가져 지금 바샤제에 대배 갑들라 단다 들라 시바다 레바 시바스고 쇠 맞춰 맹아리들라 아니 먼저 시작좀 되나 다 두고 있어 다 시바다 레바 시바스게 차자 창찬에 다 제법 미시베 갑라 아니 다디 저집에 천개를 배주 따나면도 뒤동에 용마도 써야 용마다. 그래서 두개 용수도가 상하는 거. 두개 용수도가 상주 그 답지에 봐. 유여바체 깬디가 돼. 세발 렘바 세바 속에 게 맞게로 빠져들는 것도 답지 요다. 다들 무슨 고급세는 년부터 없이 거는 샥좀 줘야 돼. 고급세는 와. 다 세발 렘바 세바 속에 돼. 차다 tun제의 상사주 아니 도도 매와. 다 도도 매와 인사도 다 가지고 켈레셔고 다 켈레는 뒤쳐도 생결 배주 당한다. 동네요 켈말레나 동네 대발이. 아니 켈레잖아. 아니 나가는 이제 로종 그냥 내디게 제네. 생기 동네 다에다 선바 자치 못해 동네 가서 다 잡아다 이제 그 생결 배주 당네. 다다 두사사와제 제부 만요 실내세바 숨고 쇠 마다 왜 가들. 오호 다 탑시 요래. 탑시 가서 이제 부터 없이 거는 시간좀 제들. 어디래? 그래서 뒤에 한 보고다 뒤에 한 먹거나
So we must accept, first of all, in terms of negativity, that when it comes to us as ordinary beings, that there isn't really anyone who falls outside of those who are constantly accumulating negativity, and that we are accumulating negative karmas constantly, and when we think about the possible results of these, and the different categories of result being a fully ripened result, like for example a rebirth in a lower realm, or the result that corresponds with the cause in terms of the experiential cause or the habitual cause, and then the environmental results that are possible too. All of these are kind of like are laid out for us as to kind of get an idea as to what is ahead if we don't purify our negativities. That these are imprints as causes on our mind stream, simply awaiting to be sparked into ripening by craving, grasping, and existence, and that then they will kind of manifest as the result itself, suffering already. Now, we must be able to conclude that therefore we must start purifying our negativities now without delay. Now there is no kind of argument really about this, that we must get into this as much as we possibly can. And so when we reflect on it in this way, we see that this is the only conclusion we can come to, because if not, it is absolutely definite that we will suffer. And like is pointed out, when the kind of a process is in motion, that we have the imprints that are now sparked into ripening by craving, grasping, and existence, then we're already experiencing that suffering. it's not possible to purify it anymore because we are already experiencing it. And that the best attitude we can have is to develop a sense of acceptance of that suffering and to really try to, as much as we can, use it as a vehicle for augmenting our love and compassion and other good qualities, as opposed to reacting to the suffering that is already manifest in our lives, and thereby exacerbating that suffering, adding suffering on top of suffering. And so it's kind of like saying we put ourselves into a situation where I have the opportunity now to deal with the suffering at the imprint level, at the imprint stage, the causal stage, before all of this ripening takes place. And therefore, I have to start to applying the 4 opponent powers as skillfully as I possibly can, purifying those causal level sufferings on my mind stream now. This is very, very important because the key piece of information that I don't have is that I don't know the timing of when these imprints are going to ripen. And so definitely I should get onto it without delay.
그래. ਪਹਿਲਾਂ 가서 세디 동에 다 먹고 좋은 데가 가서 동에 지금 매와 제한테 동에 지고도 동에 좋은데 동에만 다 동에 차상 용시 다들 가서 그 동에 가래 티 용시 백업들 아니 다 그 두개 용수 도와 창사들 그다 두개 동에 디 마요 탑시 매버려 다 이나야 동에 채도 마소에 소소 삼로 돈에 랄리기 도와 삼로 돈에 랄리네 아니 삼로디 배줄 로컬 마주한테는 아니 다 동네 세 튕겨를 배줄 땅 도와 지에다 아니 딜라 때는 다 가자 가서는 디 켈레베 돈에 마음발 동네 데데 마요 탑시 가르 약수리샤 아니 동네 고마주가 디게티 아니 녀부터 없이 거네 샥좀 지에 아니 다다 동네 용시마데 당도 내네 아니 디 가서래다 가자 당도 내네 아니 디 처집에 튕겨를 배줄 땅에 처집에 튕겨를 배줄 치마이나 아니 셈마지바도 연구 말이야 아니 디 동네에 전다 좀 맞춰도 지라 배줄 땅 두고 와 왔다 된대게 땅어도 가서네 도다디게 것도 심었지 다 심어 편지하려고도 띵이야서 라서마다 심어 편지가 동네 디게 다다 실내 세바스고 쇠다 요 말이야 다 매도 다 디게 찾아 다 두고 소에 됐다 소수님부터 없이 거네 또 최종라 때는 용도 그래 또 최종라 때는 용도 그래 어디 같은 것도 뭐 저도에 개체 버리고 뭐 저도 먼저 용보다 그러나 처바 약고 시부들에 아니 니 약고 시부들에 님께 상고 요래 다이네 그러나 동네 먹고 시부도 그것도 좀더 지금 거기서 컨디션부터 뭔가 좀 통을 뒤된데 말이야 단다가 냠내 제바 딜라 때네 동네 고마수가 되게 요거 말이 가도 그래 제도 그래 다 이나야 실레세바수가 세타는 고투 사바디가 탑시시다 요 말이 이네 데데 냠내 받을 강에 요 말이 데데 냠내 받을 최초에 튕겨를 배지 땅수에 냠내바 양고 제바 이나 어디래 다 데데 다 디가 좀 어디야 지금 랜데 주다 제보고 조단 시엔데 개쳐버려 둬 이 맞은 오야 코라 냠내바 야고를 쳐바 야고를 이나야 코라라 같이 가서 답이나 지금 낭주를 강에 먹고 통대 정도다 어디 근데 나 최대 약고 싶은데 최 내가 지금 아이나서 좀더 똑같아 용비서 어떤 내 당고를 용거로 와 이내 네가 그거 내주 도다 주다 제보 근데 저 도다 시바지 또 셀레세바스도 쇠땀네 다 동네 그래 쇠땀 사오다 탑시 내버려 산지가 가서에 요 말이 이내 지 최대 튕겨를 배주 당해도 다디 캠사 치주지도
And so obviously in this life we have experienced suffering, we are experiencing suffering, we will be experiencing suffering. So it's kind of like, it's very important to understand the kind of strategies that we can put in place to best be able to handle inevitable sufferings that will ripen for us. That once the craving, grasping, and existence have started, have awoken, as it were, the imprint to ripen. Then we are in the process of experiencing the result of the causes that we have created ourselves, and that there is no kind of way to kind of purify that. We have to go through that experience. And so it's important to understand that what are the strategies that I can put into place to best be able to deal with this level of experience. And so here, it really depends on our thinking, as it always does. What sort of mental approach am I going to adopt? Here, one process is, to a certain extent, accepting the suffering that we are experiencing, accepting the responsibility for it, because we obviously have created the causes, and that immediately should place in our thinking then the determination to isolate and identify possible causes, and to never engage in those causes again, in order to not have to experience this kind of suffering again in the future. And so this is one strategy to be able to do it. And the other way is of accepting in terms of, it's a much more profound and more subtle approach to say that actually I accept the wonderful lessons that are implicit in this suffering that I have to experience, in order to push my mind into Dharma thinking, to empathize with those who are suffering, to developing loving kindness and compassion, etc. And so you are using the suffering, transforming it, in fact, to make that experience and indeed your life meaningful. And so this is a different level again. And so these are the kind of strategies that we are, able to adopt. Now, when, craving, grasping, and existence have already set the ball in motion for you to have to experience suffering. Now, now, what about prior to when, say, craving, grasping, and existence have not yet come on the scene, and I am not yet cast into the lower realms, etc., that I have this human existence? What is it that I can do before that? And that is where this purification, powerful four aspects of opponent powers of purification comes in. And that's how we should be fully cognizant of why we're engaging in purification now, to preempt any kind of a ripening of this negative karma. And one observation that we might think about as well is that we often maybe hear people talking about such a Dharma practitioner or person is a lovely human being. They're very kind and generous and so on, but they have to experience so much unwanted suffering, and that why is that? And one might make a kind of mistaken connection, somehow saying that why, if they're such a nice person, do they have to undergo so much misfortune? And so here it's understandable that as beginners, as ordinary beings, that we may have this kind of doubts regarding the Dharma here. But again, we're not seeing the full picture. And so therefore, it's really important for us to understand the subtleties of the law of cause and effect. That we cannot experience the results of if we haven't created the causes for them. It's very, very important to understand that. And so these are kind of aspects of our approach to suffering that does arise, and our preempting of that suffering by applying the four opponent powers.
right time school at right time jet to a jet. The Majavana and Chilutana and you get young forward enough and it Namdana sir. Matam with Jula and the book of the Thomas Joseph. You Matam ever touched it, there was to go to Madison. You are that? Because to me, you Matam never just touch here. You like the Chada Tosona, Sugan Katu Mata. That delay, you thought our Unai. You thought our Unaya, here Mazo Paratilla. And never saw it with one. That you get young to go and it touched you never touched one. Touched you never touched one. What I can get Matam Meba Julani, Tebu can you talk, you Matam Meba Sansa and it Tebu talk to your money. That he do, and it so to Dunga join that Dunga join that you Matam Meba Sansa, then you would want Shele Shana, Kangamata, Garan Yamu on the Shaman Alta to what you let that Kanga Mabush to do. Dunga, some of the machine and it can't chat one. Dunga did it, Dunga you got it. Takura Samotanda Mashiba Onge, Dunga Dile charge, so to send the sorting of Dunga, you go your money. You know, Samotanda Mashiba Onge, and it's to make charge sorting it one, and to make Teba it one. To make Teba to go. What that is? What the two develop love to jail on the and to get Shimba Chen, how come a Chen, and it to make it to you know, the two Matam never sounds like that. I thought about what Dile. Less and a mobile to make the Mayo because to make the two Matam never sounds like to make your Mayo, but two Matam was together and a car check auto, and you put up to connect some that to get to it. And it sounds like again love and shit, and it that to get that mobile and leg of a sergeant and do something more too much here. Get the machine mobile on the Saba in it, the new to and a shakum check auto, how got to it. What I get the shape on it, and it I shake it to me. Got laying about cancer get the coach of my short and Java the Ninja on the summer time. What I did Tapsi Mano and Jerry Ketchup Dosha, Tapsi Norzona to make it to make was sitting on there. And some look at Tony and Tapsi None to make ever sorting among you with one. Me patch also good water, me patch all that. Narado, me patch also sorting. And because that me Namju Matawa. And it's Shung Chumbo today and Narado Pemato Chavata. Tung Chumbo Petsachim today, Winnet and Tunga. Someone never saw to it. Get it to join it to it, Teba Mayo again. And it's the nigga Shung Sachi, but it's going to pay to Matuina. And want to pet that Shung did something like your, you know, the Petan Matuna. Oh, what one? Don't have one.
So when it comes to purifying, it's all about timing, really, you know, and that it's important to purify prior to those particular negative causes developing into ripened results. And and again, to emphasize that when it is the case that the causes and conditions have come together, and that therefore that particular imprint has already ripened into its suffering result, the way in which we deal with that is fully dependent on our mental attitude. So we must have this attitude of initially, of course, acceptance of what's happening, what's going on, what we're actually experiencing. It's very, very important that this is kind of like really important to do this. And I see that in many cases in interviews and so on with people that they talk about their sufferings in such a way that it's clear that they don't have any kind of like a sense of acceptance of that suffering. And the only kind of consequence of that thinking is that it adds more suffering onto the suffering you're already experiencing. And it's unfortunate that this is a mistaken way of thinking. And it's unfortunate that it's actually the way of thinking of most people, in fact. And so it's kind of like when you understand suffering in the context of the law of cause and effect, you know, you have this more broader overview where you are able to understand that one, if I accept kind of a responsibility, some responsibility for the suffering that I am experiencing, that it is doing the job of one, not adding an extra level of bitterness and pain to that suffering, but also it starts to really give me I'm able to look into that suffering itself and go, okay, this is an unpleasant experience. I don't want to have to experience this in the future. Therefore, what sort of action do I have to take in order not to experience this in the future? That then brings me to looking into the possible causes, and therefore it starts to kind of give me an opening into adjusting, refining my own behavior to not kind of establish or collect those particular causes. So that then puts a stop to experiencing that in the future. And then, of course, there's the application of the four opponent powers prior to particular causes ripening, so that we can deal with them at the causal stage. And so it's important that we have this sort of more skillful attitude to inevitable suffering that arises. One is that, yes, we need to deal with these causes, that we don't want them to ripen again in the future, because as it says, you know, once the causes and conditions have arisen, there's nothing that can stop that result from ripening. And so we have to be able to get to it at that causal stage and really stunt it, if not completely eradicate it at that level. And this is where, you know, the four opponent power should come in. So suffering should prompt us, on the one hand, to accept. Acceptance should give us understanding. And then also we should, from that acceptance, be kind of like really spurred to quickly apply the four opponent powers to deal with these sufferings at the causal level before they ripen.
Right times, right season. So that the season the doctor how much get about that don't know how to get up there.
So basically, in short, we need to understand that this is the right time, the right season for purification, and meaning now. And don't wait until you're, you know, just shouting and screaming and crying because you're already experiencing, because that's only adding to your suffering.
Was it Gula Dona Majivache? And Gula Dona Maje Sata, and Jusata, and the because of the Womatuache, and the Shantum Jet, the Machine Bachata, you can use a Dunga Town. Why me? Why me? See that just Machine lay your Mitila Legarta, because of Ripani killing Maria, Jumjani killing Maria. And that just Machine daughter. Why me? See that just color.
So when one pays no attention to the causes, but is only operating at the one what is already ripened into its result, and then one, you know, screams and stamps one's feet and starts shouting, "Why me? Why me?" This then is kind of like, you know, there's no place for reason at that point. There's no place for the application of skillful means at that point. And there's nothing that can be done for a person who's kind of like that. It's kind of blinded, really.
다 가자 시바 디바샤발라 시차 나바 순지베도 땡게도 녀보 군도 주베다 녀발라 라토베도 다 가자 녀보 순지바 소저 디바사바데 아니 모트바체나다 어제 그서 두 콜 침반의 신체나 어담 지금 디바사바도 모트베도네 다 가자 지금 순지베도 그다로 앞에는 거저 지다 마시바전 디바지 거저 하모고제디 지금 사회의 통일의 성사제 너 아직 세샤바이나 미스 디 사야마다 디 둘달라나 남자 다 멤버다 다 같이 지기로 왔다 유수 요 말이 다 뒤난다 전에 이제 가서 두 코너를 치마를 시잖아 다 어디 톱게 니뭐 손집에 또 소소 저 anything 또 가서 저 잠도다 다 되게 쇼바니 잠도체 아니 다가 이제 셈게 또 가서 잠도다 셈게니데 내좀 차려 모두 디바사서의 유니를 산제다 가서 다 잡좀다 아니 셈게니 차대로 아니 잡돌라 때는 디바사와데 아니 잠돌라 때는 다다 용티에 다도 아니 다가니 셈젤라 미버서 아니 가서데 가서 다 셈게 자주가 셈게에 토네 다도 와다 가서나 셈젤라 너마다 란체데 공제데 자주가 셈게데 셴체데 란체데 녀버 와다 와데는 용티에다 땡크도 아니 녀복군도 좀 다디 다베 쳐도 아니 소소다 냠네 가데 지기나 다데 산제가 손날로야 오니기 돈이 또 베셔라 거야 자주가 셈 거야 나서다 잡아도 니제다 냠네 가데 쳐봐 있네 디바 다베 쳐도 제 연구를 와다 순치도 아니 고소 투데 데데 상에 와다 와데데 쳤다 와데데 쳤다 디바 다에도 서바 거야 간 연구다 냠네 가리 바래 자주 와데데 쳤다 녀발라 라도 왔다 다네서도 지금에서 다디 쉬울 게 치고 찾죠 다 녀바도 뭐 다 지금에서 라도 또 왔다 또 없이 거네 다다 제데 수고도가 와데데 쳤
And so these four outlines with which this process of the confession of purification, in fact, of negativities will be discussed, as we pointed out, the power of totally rejecting. And this is the power of regret, where we come to understand how we actually accumulate negativities, and kind of like have this kind of moment of clear kind of panic almost. It's like they say, compared to somebody who's been eating and drinking and then suddenly realizes that they have consumed poison, a deadly poison, and what would be their immediate reaction? It means that they immediately want to, get rid or to get this poison out of their system, and they'll do whatever it takes to do that, because they know that if not, the consequences are dire. And so we have to take it at that level, And so this is the power of regret, which really kind of clearly places a kind of certainty in our mind as to the negativity of the negative causes that we have accumulated, and so we have to do something about them. The second then power is the power of the basis, and this refers to going for refuge and generating bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment. And this is again very logical, because it points out the objects to whom we have been negative, and we create negativities in relation to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and we create negativities in relation to sentient beings. And so therefore going for refuge and the generation of the mind of enlightenment are proper antidotes in this regard. And the third is the power of always of using the antidote. And this, in brief, is any kind of virtuous practice that we engage in, any kind of virtue that we engage in, whether it's the reading of the text, the reading of the sutras, meditating on emptiness, generating the mind of enlightenment, doing anything to cultivate love and compassion, reciting of mantra, the establishing of Buddha statues, the Buddha texts and stupas and the like representations of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So any kind of virtue is going to count as kind of antidotes to the negativities that we have accumulated. And the fourth is one of the most important of them. This is a determination that we will not engage in negativity again, that we won't fall into the same trap again, and so that we proceed into the future with that sort of determination to really adjust our behaviors accordingly.
Sorry love and sorry love sorry love and sorry love and you kasa ngozo namje chijela ko khajyo sorry so ko konta lagyo ma tagas khane sorry wa sorry la na tak duata ko.
And again, let's pointing out too that it's that sort of like the fourth is putting strategies in place so that we don't engage in these kinds of negativities again in the future. It's not simply a sort of an aspiration, but something that must be clear in our behavior. And it's like, saying, this proclivity that Westerners have for saying sorry all the time, but they're not really sorry at all, because a sorry has to imply some sort of change. And if you're sorry for something, you recognize what is incorrect in it and you want to correct it and therefore transform and change. And so it's very important that if we are sorry for what we have done, that we are certainly not going to repeat the kind of behavior for which sorry was our response. And so it's important to understand that this is kind of like not just at the level of lip service, but actually when we talk about adjusting our behaviors for the future, not to engage in negativity again, that it actually has to count. It has to be seen to be so.
Because sorry is love to do responsible.
And so it's kind of like sorry carries with it as personal responsibility, and responsibility leads to then a change for the better. And if not, then sorry is simply a lie.
How are you like that? In a Korala, how are you like
Again, I'm saying too, when you're out and about, people ask, how are you? But they just pass by without waiting for your reply. They don't want to know.
How are you?
So it's kind of like I would say just a convention, which means nothing. It's meaningless. Otherwise, if you really were concerned about how that person was, you would wait for them to tell you how they were and explain. Tangola shi.
Tama Kebojana, Shungi Swan, number Sunjibe top, number Sunjibe top de la Shijana, and Dibachida Jibe Tuta de Jobachawa. Dibata Chesh into Chive, Jine, and Joba Comshe, Japsutoa. And a derm maybe Dibachibe, two Java Samatane, and Joba Koba. They also know and Digbe, Jigbe, to some was that Digbe, and Jigbe to some was what the chat, such a shit.
And so the first of the opponent powers, this power of totally rejecting our own negativities, or in brief, regret. So this will have 4 subheadings focusing on regret. And so these are regret through our analysis of how negativity arises, or how we engage in negativity. The second is the going for refuge and meditating on regret through the fear of dying with these negativities still on our mind stream. And thirdly, it is meditating on regret through an extensive reflection on how we engage in pointless, meaningless negativity. And the fourth one is then reflecting on how negativity brings about fear. And so again, I'm saying this is really an excellent kind of a series of outlines to deal with this point. The Mario que dikbasana matric basic. Matric basic. The gion tang the conductor medusa.
Dikbasic the pepetila dikbasic yongraba pamba.
So again, I was just pointing out that the word for negativity in Tibetan is dikpa, and it has the kind of the etymology or the connotation of a loss, of a fault, of a kind of downfall, of really something downfall, and kind of asking how does that kind of what the meaning in the English word negativity is. And so I was saying really negativity is kind of pointing out in English to something that isn't correct or is a negative. It really doesn't have that sense of a personal sort of loss or a certain fault with regard to ourselves. Yeah. So kind of like this is an important kind of distinction to make. And so again, now the first of these points, that is regret through analysis of how we engage in negativity or how negativity arises. This again has 4 subheadings, and so that it's really in kind of entreating the masters. One is entreating the masters as to the object of who we should confess to our negatives to, and secondly, through the general confession, through understanding, the time, the cause, the situation in which we engage in negativity, and thirdly, through an analysis of special powerful objects towards which we engage in negativity, and confessing those particular negativities. And fourthly is confessing through regret for regret at having to or reflecting on unwanted results. That kind of like fear of what's to come, and so we generate regret for that.
제부 두에게 동해 주에 tunje 마사 찾아 마사 외게라니 샤꿈체 제 마도 만나 미도에 제부라 삼네 아니 줘봐 줘봐 샤바스 아 줘봐 동해 마주 오면 하고 맞고 해봐라 동해 좋다도 아니 뭐 줘봐 전에 콘초가 말아 동해 마주 오는 거다 줘봐 전에 콜 탑지도 봐 어다 줘봐 샤바 뭐다 잡지 시스템도 어디를 그래서
So that fourth one, yes, is very much in line with what we have been discussing. You know, saying that if we don't reflect on suffering, if we don't engage in the application of the four opponent powers to purify, then for sure, yeah, we will have this regret for the undesirable to occur in the future. And so this is that fourth point that is being made here, reflecting on that. And so it's kind of going, you know, when suffering arises, it's kind of like it doesn't matter whether you're a Buddhist or a religious person or not, that everybody cries out because they're suffering, they manifest suffering. And so it's kind of vital, that becomes really vital for us to reflect on suffering prior to it being manifest, and to start really looking into what we can do about it. And so this is what this is all about here. It's this kind of process of generating kind of a really honest regret with regard to the causes that we engaged in, that, you know, will, you know, have generated this kind of latent suffering in our system, and being able therefore to do something about it before it actually ripens.
What that dinner at Tambudilla, that gala diva you like Kebaso as the Washabe you, that you Kebachali, Kebaso atela. Chona, Guna Shuba year, Zonsa Geta, Chanjusem, Tuje Chamu Nanala, Temojat, so on it. So on this, what's our teacher?
And so the first of these subheadings, and the objects towards, you know, whom we confess our negativities, in treating those particular objects. This is dealt with in verse number 27, which says, "With folded hands, I beseech the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who possess the great compassion and reside in all directions."
Good, Takaja, the Chona Kuna Shuba, Chona, that for Juna Shuba, what? Chona Shuba, Sobe Sanja, Chanju Samba, Tuje Chamonga, Namla, Temachata, Chona Shuba, and the Sobe Sanja, Sanja, Chanju Samba, Chanju Changse Tuje Chembo, no, so that Chanju Samba, Tuje Chamonga, Namla, Tuje Chemo, Namla, and Temuchade, and Tigmachaba, and Kube Shakwa, Cuba, that same thing that Cuba Keneta, right? Cuba Kenem, Missuma Kenem, and Shakwa. So on this, so Yamana, so that the chicken use was so deaf. Shama, which
And so here it's as it says in the verse, you know, to all those great Buddhas and Bodhisattvas endowed with great compassion, who reside in all of the directions, in all directions, with folded hands, I confess with regret these negativities, and I beseech their help.
what so because of the what's called so Taniba do number so you connect the Wachamala Chishaba, what that Chishabatilla, Zawali, Toma Mete, Koane, Serapium, Shantato, Daji, Mase, Tiki Bomb, Gidu Sewa, Nidani, Demo 2, Danute. Jesu Yiran Kanjiba, Nomba Dinner, Tongine, Samatabe Kibasha.
The second of these is the general confession, and through reflecting on the negativities we have engaged in terms of the timing, the cause, and their aspects. And this is dealt with in two verses, number 28 and 29. Throughout beginningless cyclic existence in this life and in others, unknowingly I committed negative deeds and ordered them to be done by others. Overwhelmed by the deceptions of ignorance, I rejoiced in what was done, but now seeing these mistakes from my heart, I declare them to the Buddhas.
다 뒤주들와 뒤 토마메바네다 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 그래서 고 토마메는 고 되어 인자 아니 다 토마메바네 메바당 데베서 다 코아나다 코알 토마메바 인자 그러기 셰베규나 토마메바 인자 아니 코알 토마메바 되게 차디거 되게 차디거 근데 인자 토마메바데 데베 코아나 다 코아나 코안에 손대서 코알 코데바 데네 손대 아니 다데 체럽 디엄 다다가 체럽 디엄 아니 체럽 셴도 체럽 셴도 다지 마체와데 마리바다 마체와다 딱다 마이바와다 마체와데 마리베 온기에서다 마리 몽베 온기 마리 몽베 온기 데모베 온기 안데다 라지 티바 모스기바다다 데모 온기 두숨께는 다 티바 모스 기바함 다 소소 기바 이네다 기바 아니 샬라야 샬라 제주야 기도 제바 니다네 야 셰제발라 제수 이라치 고다들 용구로 왔는데 이자 되어서 와 다가리제 렌델라 몽베 데모 투베 다 녀데 다디 디 녀네 디 셴원도 주네 아니 셴기 디바 제발라 제수 이라치 기베 그러다 기베 노바테네 다지 노바 통하게 다디 데네 누르 쇼 당게 누르 이만 고쳐고도 신기도스 누르 친구 친샤스 노바 통에서 노데 통을 기네 괴신도 다 셈띵네 아니 교바기도 괴신도 사바타베 고문나는 샤소 다 이제 투지체 못해나라 군들라니 샤르여스 what 샤 what did say 샤바우차
And so these verses look into the time, I guess, time span in which these negativities have occurred. And so it's here saying, since beginning this time in cyclic existence, that in this life and in previous lives, I who have blindly, through ignorance, through being under the power of ignorance, I have engaged in negativities directly myself, or I have incited others to engage in negativities, and then through, my own ignorance of the law of cause and effect, that sort of being kind of like, as it were, blinded again or overwhelmed by that kind of ignorance, I have rejoiced in negativities that have been done, just all the possible kind of mistakes I have made, and that knowing, then I have seen, now I see all this as a fault, and this is my kind of like real moment of clarity here. I actually now understand how fault-ridden these actions and these attitudes are, and I develop this really profound regret from the depths of my heart, and confess all of these to my protectors, the Buddhas.
what did they say? What did they say? That Suba Yu Kebache, that Yu Kebachela, Tibat of the Java Shaba, Yu Kebachela, Tibat of the Java Shabala, Zawalia, Taji Kunjo, Sumdane, Hamam, Lama Shadala, Nomu Koda, Lungata, Niji Kalapa.
The third of these outlines was confessing the negativities, powerful negativities that have been done towards special objects. And so here it's verse number 30, where it says, whatever harmful acts of body, speech, and mind I have done in a disturbed mental state toward the three jewels of refuge, my parents, my spiritual masters, and others.
아니 다가니 시게 저거 라지 파마다 라게 체들라 진지가 파마다 체디자 말이다 깨와 토마 매바네 아니 저게 파마마 저거 심지 요 말이 되네 인자 안디 파마 제베 갑라 맞아 가서네 남주 저기 가서 칠레 10대도 아니 먼저 도나시다 마요가 토네 아니 저 가서 파 저거 친구자 배주 다다 마구바 지에다 아니 점점 콘도가 샤완데는 가시 파마를 죽은데도 요르마 다가지 파마 세겐데는 요르 다가지 나서가 요르도 용어들도 왔다 지금 가서네 다 가자 지금 이다다 세디 두고 그러면 제가 파마 내바는 거나 누가 땡데데 레사바 먹고 요르마 레사바 뭐 아니 황전도 먼저 파마다 보고 쓰거든 가서네 시골이 예보 임바이자 아니 가서네 지결 마서 지게 가서 가서네 깰레스전 가서네 답답 맞아 잖아 레라부 전에 소소 대화도 막아 끼게 두자 두자 마에다 마구바 지에다 아니 딜라이 견주 지에다 딱 배불 와다지 나라 솔레다 근데 딜라이 텐데 좀 요도 가버려 뭐 차랑 가만 날다 딱 라스팅 비샤 셈 녀몽 비샤와도 전에다 너밖에 못 보여요 그 파마스인데 나라 솔라 딱 치우도 가서래 그 유케바제 차도 딜라 펜바 주가야 아니 개월랍서 못 투야 딜라 너바 주도 개바이나 디발랍서 못 사도 냐라 디바쳐도 마타게 좀 요래 어떤데 좀 요래 다 디가도 뭐 마시 엄마가 온 거보다 파마 소남지에서 가서 파마 하면서 소남지 신 다다다 소남지 신 레다 저비 라마 셴달라 소소 추ende 추기 저와요 왔다 체디자 말에 사람 가만 남래 되게 저와요 근데 뭐 요쪽으로 왔다 제대라 안 제달라 녀몽 도숨제 군날랑데 아니 르다 나다 이제 거네 안데바 기와 르가 이수 거네 인데바 기와 가라바 되다 아니 소소 샤바 기고 어디 저다 근데 되게 냐바 통할 거네 소소 체디자 말에 체딜라 소소 되게 중마도는 약호래 제수 이란테 이네 사람 가만 나라 텐데 저 용초그래 딱 그때 임바이도 딱 그뒤 제멜라 마도바 그거 토만 나바네 다 디과 샤데 그 디괴 그 바자데 토만 나바네 저와지 차되고 요 되게 차르버데 세디기 두고 계데 시고 요 말바 시고 바다 세딜라 소저 데베게 파마다 안 소저 로벨라 소바 지금 라마라 소바 다가는 저 구조솔라서 막구바 제와 되게 젬바 되게 다 마제마 토만 나바네 요래 되게 등가 오다 노바기 발라고서 다 저도 노디 좀 치샤 셈되네 대달라 소소 샤바기 워 어떻게 쳐 제가 소소 샤스데 지다데르 지다 소소 샤스데 번나 당고도 동바 숨라잖아 소다고 동바 자주 세베 동바 상하고 동바 지다 집에 돈에 아니 샤좀 제 동으로 소소 샤스게 치 야 다가는 제 녀바 소소 제바데 셰베 돈에 샤좀 지요 소소 샤스 고토터 와 남주 동바 남주 소소 샤스게 거에도 또 지금 동바 소소다 집에 아니 동바 딜레 개바 주모데 아니 동바 데다 좀 샤좀 지야 또 앞에나 소다고 동바 되게 아니 진주고 샤좀 지야 자주 선바게 동바데 아니 산자다 자주 선바 군들 샤좀 지야 상하게 동바데 개와 되게 아니 기본 하도도 샤좀 지야 어디 연구 열어 봐.
And so yes, so this is an important verse for being able to kind of like demarcate that to whom we have engaged in negativities. Now we may, look into this in terms of, this life, and we may actually, when we really honestly reflect on it, not consider that we have engaged in any particular negativities, and have which therefore we can rejoice in virtues that we've engaged in towards these particular objects. But of course, it's not just this life we're concerned with. We have to look into previous lives as well, and all our previous lives, and to consider all of those, for example, who have acted as our parents in those lives. And then when we look into how easily it is to have shown disrespect towards our parents, anger towards our parents, and it's because of that particular closeness there between parents and children as well, and that these actions engaged towards each other, they carry so much weight that it's very, very important, and to understand then that how even very carelessly we can be engaging in offhand disrespect and negativity towards our parents and so on. And so it's kind of very, very important to see that this is actually not a very rare occurrence, but actually quite common. And in our previous lives, we have to assume and gain some sense of certainty with regard to how common this has occurred in all our previous lives, and towards all those who have acted as father and mother towards us. And so therefore, and there's a great variety of negativities that we have engaged in towards our parents in that way. And very, very important that we understand that it's a very powerful object towards whom we have engaged in these negativities, and therefore they need to be purified. And so it's like towards parents as well, that if we engage in virtue, of course it's a very powerful virtue, but if we engage in negativity, it's correspondingly a very powerful negativity as well. And that this is the meaning of these special objects, and that therefore in terms of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha engaging in negativity there, that's quite obvious. That to our teachers, our spiritual teachers and gurus as well, we have engaged in negativities, if not in this life, then in the past for sure. And so all of these have to be taken into account. We gave conviction with regard to the fact that yes, they are as negativities on our mind stream, and they have to be purified, confessed, and purified. And that's that's in terms of vows that we may have broken from those who have given us those vows. For example, the Pratimoksha vows, the Bodhisattva vows, the Tantric vows, and so on. And that those Pratimoksha or individual liberation vows are confessed to members of the Sangha. Those Bodhisattva vows to the Buddhas, and those Tantric vows that we have broken are they have been broken, or that we confess those to the mandala deities of that particular tantra. And that this also can mean that we are confessing and purifying negativities, the particular negativities towards each of these powerful objects. Those are the Buddhas and so on, the triple gem, towards our gurus and masters, and towards our parents and so on. So we'll have to stop there. I think the time is caught up on us.
And that young because of the computer toss your
Yes.
Oh yeah. Rather doing the la and tabula to the somewhat about Thomas Shantideva set out what that is an honor. What is that? What 다들 이제는 닦아져죠. 어들 다랑게 지워들라 아니 저거 가서 배마다 니마다 다외 되네 닦아져 그 연중의 섬지 되는 연중의 셈데 아니 랑게 지워 배마 지워 배마 담아 지워질 조소 섬사체 아니 되네 다 그저 지난 거 저거 내 저번에 유대는 좀 뒤상 요마 섬섬을 딱 아니 되게 예매 로디 근데 가서 가담때 니는 로디 아니 니네 기관지 조소 섬사체 되네 심지어 탐대로 산적 고마도 탐도 터버치기 섬사고 로지 되네 로디 다위 기관지라 주저다게 주고도 배만 님만 다위 기관지 공부시 아니 라게 되나 세대면 아니 라마샤자 생각되는 젠더랑게 지고라 젠더나 빨려서 라마를 뭐지 다게 주고 보면 그리 좀 고소도 정도로 찾아서 그래서 저발을 때는 세대 당부 저발을 때는 아니 그 랑게 지고를 쳐 니베가도 슈 수베가도 때도 주나 산제 고마마도 모두 제 소소 소나 가고
So again, we bring our minds to focus on the figure of Shakyamuni Buddha visualized in the space in front, and we begin the process of preparing the lotus sun and moon disc mandala seat on our crown in preparation for inviting the Buddha to come and reside there. So the lotus, of course, arises from our reflecting on renunciation, the suffering nature of cyclic existence, and that mind is about the lotus disc mandala, then recognizing how all phenomena lack any objective existence completely. From that mind state, then arising the sun disc mandala seed, and then reflecting on our aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, and that mind of bodhicitta bringing about the moon disc mandala. So now we have our seat prepared. Again, we make our invocation to the Buddha to come and sit there, O glorious and precious root Guru. Come take the lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind. At the end of the first recitation of that verse, the Buddha begins the journey towards our crown. At the end of the second, has found himself seated there. And at the end of the third recitation, we understand that the Buddha will remain steadfast there until we ourselves attain the state of enlightenment.
다 야고 시우츠도 산제 고마마도 봐도 라마샤자 생각제 소소 소나 가와고
And then we rejoice in that recognition that the Buddha will be there to look after us until we attain that enlightenment. How wonderful.
근데는 다 가서 찾아와도 제대로 그 털려져 다 가서 그래서 단다까지 다들 야라도 메데다 저마치 푸네 아까지 지켜줄래 또다 서로 단전 원들을 찾아와도 최셔와 최소의 구시도 저 주소당에 찾아와 담대당에 자주 치고 오서 어디 아니 사실 것이 주제마다 레알리티인데 저보다 산제처럼 저거 남다시라 저거 이당고로 되는 문제라 많이 다야 네스 야라도 메데다 저마치 토사치 단지 서부터
And then at this point, for the purpose of purifying negativities on the one hand and the accumulation of positive merits on the other, we make the offering of a 7-limbed practice and then offering of mandala as well.
그는 뒤지 여와 있는 뒤지 법자 전에 야부여다 이때는 또 버티고 오고 라마샤자스 게 지워 옴 저바 투가 홀레 뒤지 교파도 매버전에 아니 라기 루가사베 코나사베 티파도 다서 아니 가 코나스마 티바데 이 코나사베 티파도 다서 뒤지 법자 전에 어디를 전에 뱀에서 야부여다 이나 딱 가이나면 되게 저 삼타 아니 되네 아니 라기 닝데 다가자저 다 되게 내셔 삼었다네 가서도 코알라 녀바주에 연종지 삼도다네 아니 연종디 라기니데 담마다게 저소 속서잖아 아니 다 되게 내셔 전에 친난 그 초크데지나 유대나 도마도 교정요 말이야 그래서 그 때는 좋아이도 유대는 용당거라 믿어서 아니 근데 가자 까점들 삼도 스탄체 아니 근데 그 로티 가서도 님의 긴거지를 교소서 빼매던 때는 다 심지어 탐지가도 산제 고마 맞으나 탐에도 대두마치기 삼사게 되게 아니 가서 다 같이 삼로스탄에 아니 되게 로티 된데 그 로데 아니 다외진 거처럼 주소 써서 되는 반대자가 너무나 뭐 다기니까 좀 그래 구조도 좀 우리 짜도 쓰대잖아 담배 가서 마저 니베 가서 순배 가서 때려주는 산지가 고마마도 모두 제 소소도 야고 쉬우 좀 써서 고마셔.
And at this point, too, if we have time, it's really effective to do the descending nectar light meditation, where we visualize the Hong at the heart of the Buddha on our crown, the crown, the throat, and the heart of the Buddha on our crown, and then we begin to think of the negativities that we have accumulated in terms of the with our body, the physical negativities that we have accumulated, the verbal negativities that we have accumulated, the mental negativities that we have accumulated, and then with the corresponding nectar lights streaming down from the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha and into our crown and so on. And purifying all those negativities. That would be an excellent point at which to do this practice if you have the time. And that, and then we begin the process of preparing the lotus sun and moon disk mandala seat at our own heart for the purpose of inviting the Buddha from our crown down to the heart center. And again, through our reflecting on the sufferings of cyclic existence, and this attitude of wanting to desperately gain a definite release from cyclic existence, that mindset brings forth the lotus seat, and then reflecting on the fact of no phenomena having any objective existence, and that implies immediately that they all are arising in dependence. That this then establishes the sun disk, and then through really establishing how essential, indeed vital, it is that I attain enlightenment. I mean, I have no choice in the matter, really, that I have to attain enlightenment in order to fully benefit all sentient beings. And this mind of enlightenment, or bodhicitta, gives rise to the moon disk mandala. And then we again recite the invocation verse, "O glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, speech, and mind." This is recited thrice at the end of the first, the figure on our crown, and moves down through our crown chakra, down through the central channel. At the end of the second, arrives at this pre-prepared seat at our heart. And at the end of the third, is established steadfast there again, with that certainty in our minds that the Buddha will remain there to help us until we attain the state of enlightenment. And this again brings forth this sense of confidence and joy. This is something really special.
아니 디 타고도 다가자 또베증아 다야도 엄무니무니 마음을 다야도 엄무니무 다야도 엄무니무니 마음을 되게 리버숨게 거되겠지 아니 되네 아니 저 자매가 생각 엄 알아봐도 나디디디디디디디디디디 그래서 리버숨게 거되겠지 되네 때제가 엄 예다마 해도 저 다다가도 마셔만에 있어 된다 리버숨게 거되겠지 아니 랑게 닝기 우유소 아니 라마샤자스게 아니 배 네바티 고소토라 세트네 아니 랑게 루 지고네 칸티가 빠게 아니 배 루가 낭 탐자라 여기 참데 아니 대차발라 때네 랑게 토마 메바네 아니 지가서데 다간자 속 줘봐 마지막에 봐 니상와 줘봐 나서봐 다간데 생게 아니 지금 그 참아 지소 나게 나서봐 다간데 낙셈 뉴센 록다 나서봐 대디가 체디엄 생아마 대응아마 토마 메바네 사바디게 장진다 다가니 시가 쏟아게 도마다 가와 세대어 생각만 넘게 토만 매반네 다가니 세대어 생각만 넘 토만 매반네다 자주세면 도마다 가와 다가니 세대어 생각 토만 매반네 아니 상하게 도마다 가와 다 예바 건데지 싸우이네 자제 하나마도 봐 제배 하나마도 예바 건데지 싸워이네 다 뉴스 말라와지 봐 다수 삼자 아니 다바 차수 삼자 아니 다가니 생게 제 가서다 what did it a니 랑게 아니 다가니 시게 그래 다가자 장치다 다가니 시게 아니 뉴도 산제 고마 토여라 라게 루테당 거래 아니 제가 류라 내나서 가리 요바 이네 되게 돼 내가 차소 삼삼치 다가니 지금 셈라 아니 지금 셈 투대다 마기마 소저가 된데게 아니 지금 남도 로바테네 근데 좀 되게 탐제 안배 장치 다 삼삼 안 다가니 지금 랑게 지금 조직 ခွဲ 많이 받아 큰 받자 자 롱틸레 냠자치네 교연디가 다 장치다 학교도 뉴도 산제 고마 타올라 탐에가 나셔도 교연 치주인 봐도 탐에가 나셔 교연 가리 이번에 봐 다니 단다 야고 쉬고 청소 삼삼 데레 삼는 아니 랑게 신도 저 롱데 년는 게 라마샤자스가 꾸든 현지지 괜찮 다 소설 류데 라마샤자스가 꾸는 삼삼자 계속 매번 줄 삼삼자 랑게 신도 차에 셈데 년래자 라마샤자스가 꾸든 현지지 괜찮 아니 랑게 셈데 라마샤자스가 꾸는 교수서 계속 매번 줄 삼삼자 랑게 누가 있어 라마샤자스 꾸든도 뭐 예매도 교수 삼삼 아니 내디야 아니 라마샤자스가 아니 배 가서데 다베시도 교수 소소 어디데 제
So then the petals of the lotus now arise and fold over at the top and are sealed at their tips by a 5-pronged white vajra. And then the mantras that again surround this folded package, starting with the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha, and then the mantra of wisdom, Om Rapatsana D, 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 and then the mantra of dependent origination. So the first in the clockwise direction, the second in the anti-clockwise direction, and the third in the clockwise direction again. And immediately, once these mantras have been established, then powerful light rays that begin to emanate from within, from the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and permeating through the lotus, and indeed to every single cell of our bodies, from the crown of our heads to the soles of our feet. And indeed, our whole body transforms into this kind of state of light. And it's a purification light, which begins the process of purifying all the negativities we have accumulated since beginning this time, including, those pure negativities of killing, stealing, of sexual misconduct, of harsh speech, divisive speech, lying and gossip, and for the mental negativities of covetousness, malicious intent, and wrong view. All of these negativities, not just in this life, but in the previous life, in the previous life to that, and in all lifetimes, right to beginning this time. And that we kind of purify all of these particular negativities, and that then we purify all of the negativities and faults and infractions that we have accrued through the vows that we have taken, be they the individual liberation vow systems, or the Bodhisattva vows, or the tantric vows, and that all kind of faults that we have engaged in there, they are purified. And all the naturally occurring faults, and those all those behaviors that have been proscribed by the Buddha, any infraction of those, that they are also completely purified, as well as their imprints. And indeed, in order to quickly attain the state of enlightenment, any illness or disease in the body is purified. There's the balancing of the elements in the body. All our kind of superstitious attitudes are eradicated that we have, and particularly, the channels, winds, and drops, and so on, are purified, and that particularly nasty fault of that prevents us from attaining enlightenment quickly, the way we see everything in ordinary appearance. So we do away with that, and we start to perceive in pure appearance, and that all of this then is kind of a sense of completely purifying our body, speech, and mind. And so then, through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of a Buddha. And again, through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And so here then, this place that I am in is also transformed from its ordinariness into a pure realm as well.
어디서 어디다 라라마 샤자스 꾸르주가 어디 두갈래 아니 그서도 다 저거 왜서 빠도 매부터 심지가 장다냐 봐. 다 감성게 심지가 장다냐 봐. 아니 왜서 저발 때네 아니 아니 감성도 심지가 다 탄자자 아니 저 대다 탄자자 이게지가 라마 샤자스 꾸수도 거 이메 조수서 사자 내대가 대다 내기 교원 탐제 된 라마 샤자스 게 다베시 조수 삼서 어디도 고마셔 오다 심제 탐자 라마 샤자스 꾸르주바 에디 체도 아니 소소이 겨와 가르사마 대 겨와 두긴 그 소소의 제마 그가 아니 유대는 마도마 아니 똑배 파다 점제 선서 고마셔 아니 딜라테네 겨와체 대외 동바체 동배 겨와체는 대통령 수의 시켜서 선서 고마셔.
And so I rejoice here that now I see my own body, speech, and mind as being indivisible from the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So from my own heart center as an enlightened being, I send out countless rays of light equal in number to all of the beings in all the 6 realms of existence, that on touching them, they are purified of all negativities and automatically arise as enlightened beings. Their place also is transformed from a fault-ridden place to a pure realm, and that and then I can see that the sentient beings who have reached that state of enlightenment, the virtue that has led to them attaining that state, and myself as the agent of that virtue, that they lack any objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. This realization produces bliss, which combines with voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and oneness.
뭐지 다다다데 뭐가 이제 잡으래 문에 걸어들에 가려고 이래야 디 답가서 깨를 쟤네 디 튕겨서로 쟤네 아니 다 문에 걸어들에 되게 두두 아니 두루 좋아쇼스 뭐 아니 다디 되게 다다 되게 사면서로 쟤네 아니 묘도 되게 두두 얘기 아니 다 교주가 뭐다 다데 용알라 아니 심제 탐자 산지가 살코발라 라산지가 코마토고 티토발라 란줄라 아니 돈이 인지니 부지가 람줄라 켐부리 단데가 소소게다 지게 내가 상에 근데도 좋아 이마 이나야 그러와 지금 상보다 녀바다 딱 내가 근데도 차와 이나 되게 그가 돈이 인지니 부지가 람줄라 켐게 튕겨라 주어쇼 디 계제트에 줄을 주어서 튕겨서에 줄을 주어서 어디 뭐지
And of course, we are operating at the level of the imagination and aspiration here. Of course, we simply can't attain these states so easily, but we can sincerely dedicate so that these conditions will act as conducive conditions for quickly making such a state manifest. And so I dedicate sincerely on that basis, and be able to dedicate also so that I will always hold all sentient beings dear, that I will see all situations that I am in, whether positive, negative, or neutral, as conditions for engaging in the Dharma, particularly cultivating the loving kindness, compassion, and this mind of enlightenment.
어디로 고마셔 개완디
라모 사예 You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence. And Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Losa Drakpa, at your feet I make request.
그래서 너 토지체